Okay. Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm well. How are you,
Doing
Douglas?
doing great. Thank you. Thank you for
Good.
coming on the show. It's nice to have you
Thank you for
here.
having me.
So we're going to be talking about looks like music today, which is my favorite topic to talk about
Oh, cool.
since I am a
That's
musician
cool.
and have been for my whole life. Specifically, we're going to looks like we're talking about the 1950s and the advent of rock and roll, yeah?
Yes, the best.
I just watched a special on YouTube and I don't know where it came from, but it was really good. It was a reenactment of the early life of Little Richard.
Oh, that
And
sounds cool.
yeah, it was really good. It went right up to when he shared the stage with Sam Cooke. I think it was in London at some point. And, went through the sort of turmoils of his life. And the term that I hadn't heard before that they coined in this was Little Richard was the architect of rock and roll. And I think that that's pretty accurate, yeah?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that statement. He played a bigger part than I think he was given credit for.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But if you look at like Elvis and the Beatles, and they all credit Little Richard, every one of them,
Definitely.
you know?
Well, you said this was a reenactment?
Well, it was like somebody portraying him.
Oh, cool.
It wasn't,
I'll check it out.
yeah, it wasn't just actual archival footage. I mean, it was somebody actually playing him, and it showed him when he was a little kid growing up, and do you know what I mean? So it was good. It was different. I hadn't seen anything like that.
I'd like to check that out. I'm gonna have to look for that.
Yeah, I don't remember the title, but I'll see if my producer can find it for you. If we can find
Cool.
it, we'll send you the link. Okay.
I always like watching stuff like that. I've done a lot of, research that way too, just watching, well, watching a lot on YouTube and kind of digging around for like vintage footage and stuff like that. So yeah, it's awesome.
Well, I was going to ask you if you did a lot of research for your books because you've got two books, uh, Hound Dogged and Hard Dog's Night, which is cute. It's a bit of a takeoff on the Beatles' Hard Day's Night, right? But this is a historical fiction, right? It's not just a documentary uh, history of rock and roll. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean the books involve like the 1950s as a whole, I think. It's not just about the rock and roll. It's kind of like a coming of age story, but there's a lot going on uh, in the story that just surrounds the whole 1950s feel, like their belief system and what was going on in terms of, they were more conservative, and it was just a quieter time. And just when with the start of rock and roll coming in, it started to change things. And kids, I think young people, they started to change during that time anyway, because they had more income accessible to them. So they could focus more on like fashion and going out with friends and things like that. So I think it was the start of the changes that happened, kind of set up the 60s, if you will, because I think kids just started to change and go in a different direction anyway. And then like the whole women in the house, that started to break apart as well. The women wanted to, started to think more about going and getting jobs and work, and not being just the wife at home taking care of the husband and the kids. And then, you had the introduction of TV, and that brought in a whole other dynamic into the period where you like had commercials, and that was influencing how people thought.
It was sort of the calm before the storm, wasn't it? Like you said, the 50s sort of set up the changes in the 60s. In the 60s, it was much more radical and much more tumultuous,
Yes.
you know. So
Yeah, especially for the young people, I think.
tell us a little bit about the book, or the books. This is you're on the second book, right? At this
Yes,
point.
yeah, yeah. Like you just said, it releases next Tuesday.
Okay.
And it's about a group of young men who are they're friends, and they get together and they form a rock group, a rock and roll band in 1958. Um, they start out with one vision and it ends with another, because in the beginning of Hound Dogged, the two of the main characters, they have a conflict with the group that they're in now. Patrick wants the group to go in a more serious direction. He wants to get more polished. He wants to start taking it serious. And John, the co-founder of the group, is just not on that page. He likes having fun and hanging out with his friends and just kind of wandering in whenever he feels like it. So he's not really on that getting serious page. So that starts the rift in the group. And you have other two members who are just not as talented, they're not as good, and they're struggling with their talent for different reasons. And then one of the band members, Stu, introduces his friend to the group, James, who actually is a good guitar player. He has some background. And so that just they add him, and then he's kind of adds a whole other piece to it. So that's kind of where the book starts. And then there's a rival group in the book called the Dice, and they're a group of high polished, kind of narcissistic group that is on the verge of making a record, and so they're on their way to the top.
Okay, I see the Hound Dogs versus the Dice. So the Hound Dogs is the one, that's the name of the band that you were talking about before, right?
Yeah, they're the first group. They're the young men that come together. Yes.
Oh, okay. So there's a rivalry. Is the rivalry similar to like the Beatles versus the Stones? Is it like that?
No, not really.
Okay.
It comes down to the first thing that really comes into play is the Hound Dogs. They meet this guy. His name is Danny, and he's super talented. He's really awesome, and he saves their first gig from being a complete disaster. So they form a friendship with Danny, but Danny has an audition with the Dice. So that kind of starts with that, because, of course, John would like to keep Danny and the Hound Dogs, but do you want to stay with a group that's going nowhere, or do you want to go with a group that is going somewhere?
Got it. Okay.
So there's kind of that start to it, and then a song that John writes gets thrown in there, and the Dice want to steal it from him, and so that's kind of what starts it all.
There's something on here called urban exploration. And it's your bio says, ask Rebecca to discuss urban exploration. So tell us what you mean by that.
Well, my husband is a photographer, so we go out to abandoned locations and take pictures. Basically, in eastern Colorado, like ghost towns and abandoned places, things like that. There's a real genre for that, for people that are really into those kinds of photography. And so that's what we do kind of on the side as a hobby. It's more his hobby than mine.
This isn't related to the book, is it?
No.
Oh, okay. This is something else.
Yeah.
How come you picked Hard Dog's Night as a, because that really is synonymous with the Beatles, which was probably the next decade from when your book was set, yeah?
Yeah, I think of course, I love the Beatles. I grew. I guess you could say I grew up with them more than the 50s music, although my parents played a lot of the 50s music. But I just, was trying to come up with a title for the book, and that the boys just are going through they go through such a hard time in the second book. And I was just one day, I just sitting there thinking, oh, it's kind of like a hard day's night. So I just changed the day to dogs because they're dogs. Oh, the Hound Dogs. Yeah.
The Hound Dogged. So you're up to book 2. How many books do you foresee being in this series? How far do you
Well,
want to keep going with it?
it was going to be 3, but there's so much going on. And so it's looking like it's probably going to be 4.
Oh, okay. Are you going to take them into the 60s?
No.
So the series will end at 1959, presumably?
Yeah, or later on, 1958. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You said that you did a lot of historical research for this. What was there something specific that you found that you didn't know prior to researching?
Oh, yeah, it was amazing because I really thought I knew a lot about the 50s music, but the more I dug into it and started listening to more of it, other than just the rock and roll, you had Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole and, those kinds of artists too. So it was really interesting, and how the whole controversy came about and what caused the controversy behind rock and roll. I mean, I knew, of course, about how a lot of, the older generation frowned down on Elvis when he first came along because he was so, shall we say, enthusiastic. So they looked down on him. So yeah, I learned a lot about the controversy over rock and roll.
Yeah, there was a lot. Aside from Elvis, there was a whole racial component to it, and where a lot of people referred to rock and roll as black music, and they didn't want it integrating into white society. And
Yeah, they called it the devil's music.
The devil's music,
for sure.
Yeah.
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 Because in that way they could bring in, like it made it sound even more evil.
Well, it was running concurrent with the civil rights movement in the United States, where segregation was being outlawed in the South, and the schools were trying to integrate. All of this sort of happening at the same time as rock and roll was becoming very popular amongst white teenagers.
Yeah, and like you were saying, yeah, they didn't like it because it had its origin in the blues, which is predominantly African American, and they, like you said, they didn't want the races intermingling, but the kids had no problem with that. They just wanted to hear the music. A lot of the kids, they didn't care if there was intermixing of the races. They had no problem with that. It was the older generation that did.
Well, we are just about out of time. So you said that the second book has been released, right?
Next Tuesday, August 8th.
Next Tuesday, August 8th. Okay.
6th, sorry.
6th? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I guess the last question is, do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yes, I do. It's RebeccaHendricks.com, RebeccaHendricksAuthor.com. And I'm also on Facebook at Rebecca Hendricks Author.
Well, again, thank you for coming on the show. Best of luck with the books. I hope they do well.
Thank you for having me.